Welcome to techCast, the podcast that quenches curiosity, powered by Q&A Markham. techCast, where we deep dive into the exciting world of technology, bringing you the latest trends, innovations, and thought-provoking discussions. Join us on this exciting journey as we explore the boundless possibilities of technology.
Hello and welcome to another episode of techCast. Our guest today is Kapil Matta, a cybersecurity expert and vice president of ISACA. Welcome, Kapil. Can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Anita. Thanks for calling me in. Since we know each other, but I'd like to give my introduction. Yes, I've been in the cybersecurity space or the consulting space for almost close to 2 decades. Initially, I was a banker, but then moved on to the InfoSec side. I had the so apart from ISACA, where I am the vice president, I do head Digital X-Force, which is basically a CSMA or let's say an ESPRM tool or a platform to probably look at. So I had that as a professional, but then on the industry peer side, I basically had ISACA UAE chapter, where I'm vice president for it, and basically make sure that I ensure that most of the programs are met, and we probably interact more with our peers within the UAE chapter. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about something that is completely in your realm and something that you've been doing for a long time, which is the siloed aspect of security, compliance and security regulations, and also third-party risk and vulnerability.
All right. Fantastic. I think so. Yeah, these are big topics, but
Absolutely.
I'll try and see how much I can do justice to them. But yeah, I think so. These are very relevant topics currently in the realm of cybersecurity, or let's say GRC as a practice as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's begin with a basic intro.
Yeah.
So what exactly do we mean when we say security operates in silos?
Well, to be fairly honest, Anita, that's a fabulous question because we have multiple organizations, whether you look at smaller organizations or large enterprises. The issue that we really see right now is most of these organizations would have their operational roles, where you have teams which are different teams working in different operational roles. But and let's say even if it's an enterprise, then you have, let's say, 3 lines of defense, where you have the first, which is the operational, B, which is second, like the GRC, and C, which is like the third, which is your audit. But all of these functions, the reason why they work in silos is because the KRAs and the KPIs are mapped in such a manner. But if you honestly look at the overall goal of your organization is where we need to really achieve, right? Like what we need to achieve, let's say, at the end of the year. And that's where we miss is how much do we collaborate and how much data that is there, which is relevant data, which is, which should be accessible to everyone. And that's where the siloed approach keeps coming in, because you start, thinking I'm the owner, or this is my ownership. And that's where you get stuck on things, right? And that's where the siloed approach actually comes in. But I think so, which is very important for organizations to probably look at how do we collaborate more, and how do we ensure that there is data, which could be relevant data for every single team, available and at their disposal to take the right decisions with the stakeholders, right? So that's how you can break it up. But having said that, it's a little difficult because you need to change the culture of an organization.
Right.
You really need to set the right examples, set the tone from the top. That's very, very important. So I wouldn't say that it's impossible, but I would say that it would take some time. And I think so as we mature as an organization, things would probably as a region as well, we probably see that coming through very, very much within this region as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So like you say, there are challenges, but then it's not something that can't be overcome.
No, absolutely not. Yes, they can be achieved. Yes.
Absolutely. Now, why has this siloed approach persisted for very long? And what do you think are the reasons for that?
See, one of the reasons which I just said is what really comes to my mind is A, in terms of the maturity. B, when I say maturity of an organization, in terms like how old the organization has been, what are the best practices they have been following, and where does the compliance really fit in, right? Once you have the regulatory compliance fitting in, and if the leadership takes that challenge, right, and says that, hey, this is important, and it's just not tick the box exercise, which usually happens, that's where the whole change comes through. And to be fairly honest, as I said, tone from the top, right? The tone from the top is very, very critical because we always think that, it's either a technical function that will probably do the job, etc., etc. So the tone, but if you, and to be fairly honest, to a great reason, to a great extent, I would probably say that it's also a mistake of, let's say, the technical experts or the SMEs to present the data or present the facts in a more technical manner rather than talking the language of the business, right? If I really talk the language of the business, let's say if I, let's say we look at, we are onboarding a big project, let's say a cybersecurity project, or let's say whatever it is, how much relevant, like how do you make yourself relevant in the sense like, are you really speaking the language which your stakeholders would like to hear, which would be, let's say, what is the ROI, what is the gestation period, what would be the outcomes, and how would it impact, the efficiency and the operational controls within the organization, and how much are you becoming more compliant within the frameworks that you look at from any regulation. So if you talk like that, it will make a lot of difference, and that's where you'll probably see, a big change. So these are major reasons. I would probably say that this siloed approach has always been there for a long, long time. So I would probably say it's both ways. It's just not one side, it's both sides. And everybody has to really look in terms of how we can change that, the approach. And that's how we can probably inculcate a better and more collaborative environment within the organization.
Absolutely. So I think it's a question of awareness as well, the knowledge of how to present something, and the knowledge of...
Absolutely. I'll be very honest because, when we approach, let's say, on my day-to-day basis, even at my current role at Digital X-Force, the point happens is when we reach out to, CISOs or, senior stakeholders, the point that we really see is the way they are trying to, talk to the senior management is very technical. So I would probably say that the way that how you would want to present your dashboards or let's say your talk to your management should be, absolutely clear. You should always talk about, okay, these are the relevant ground jewels that we are trying to protect. This is the project that we are trying to, look at it. This is these milestones that we'll probably achieve. And this would be the investment, and this is the ROI that we'll achieve end of the, the light that comes at the end of the tunnel. And only once you give them that, confidence that, hey, your subject, but at the same time, where, in terms of where the organization is and where they really want to meet and what could be the regulatory impact on it. I think so that's the time that you will be in great hands. So
absolutely.
That's how I would probably say that. Yeah.
Right. Now, we're seeing a shift globally with regulators trying to catch up, basically.
Yeah.
So what do you think has triggered this surge in regulatory attention towards cybersecurity and risk management?
Okay. To be fairly honest, we always used to have the ISO frameworks and the regulatory bodies were always there. It's not that it's picking up now. But the point I would probably say that is that the pace at which technology is changing, which means that the regulators it's always like a cat and a mouse kind of a thing where you always need to catch up, right? So if the technology, only once the technology comes in, you'll probably have, let's say, customers or let's say organizations buying those technologies, which are new age technologies. The ones they buy that up, once there's a use case about it, only then the regulators will come in and probably try and say, hey, you need to have a framework. Let's say, for example, the AI, right? Now we have the AI Act, the European Act, and we had the ISO framework around it and all of that, right? But AI, when we talk about chat GPTs or let's say your Geminis or whatever of the word, they came let's say 3 years back or something, right? So, but we needed, the regulators needed to probably look at what's really going on, what all areas of technology that you guys are touching, how is your infrastructure, getting exposed to it? Is there any data, customer data, etc., which is getting going into wrong hands, etc. So only once they have understood how the technology works,
Right.
then only, a regulator will come up with a framework saying, okay, these are your best practices, ensure that you're complying. And that's how it is. So I would probably say that, yes, the regulatory bodies have always been there, but it's just the pace at which technology is changing is drastic.
Absolutely. And I think it's the gap between the technology development and the understanding of it. I think it's that gap that is being addressed right now.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Now, do you think the current regulations are helping to break down the silos, or are they actually a hindrance?
No, I wouldn't say that they are a hindrance, to be fairly honest. Like, I think so. To be fairly honest, they are more like helping us come together. Because, once now, let's be very honest, like, let's take the example of UAE, right? We had the international standards of, let's say, on cybersecurity, which was ISO 27001 framework. 2018, 2019, NISA came in, right, which was basically the UAE regulatory body to say where are we on, on the cybersecurity side of it. And then we had now the UAE as well, so different versionings of it, right? What has this helped us is basically to come together and probably look in terms of, okay, what needs to be done and trying to, fit in that framework, right? Until unless you do not have a framework, we do not have anything to look at things, right? When I say look at things in the sense from a big picture, how would you define what are the trends? Let's say not only UAE-wise, let's say globally or GCC-wise, whatever, right? So only once you have this framework in, you will have organizations following it. Then you start seeing the trends that you really want to see. And that's how we try and approach that, saying, okay, this is where we are good, this is where we are bad. And that's how we learn, the areas of improvement that we really look at, or let's say the continuous, improvement that we really talk about, right, from a consulting point of view. So these are areas that now we are maturing. And for, let's say, even the regulators, it becomes easier for us to say, okay, this was my first edition, third edition now, but this is where we really need to improve. And these are the areas that, organizations will start moving in. And that's where, let's say, the likes of, let's say, I think so, we should definitely have, let's say, an AI Act or something, which should be coming up very soon, specifically for UAE as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, the importance of a robust framework and a structure cannot be emphasized, especially because technology is developing so rapidly. So you need something to...
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the reason, that's where I was trying to say that's how organizations then will start collaborating better. Because then that's the time where you probably also look at your vendors responding back to you. And that's where your third-party risk management will also really make a lot of sense. Because, the whole point is when you start regulating, you're putting in a framework, organizations are, trying to comply themselves towards, a framework, let's say, or a control family. And then when you look at those controls, are you looking then at point in time? We were looking at point in time. Now everybody's talking, let's say, continuous improvements, or let's say, continuous monitoring or automation and all of that. That's coming. But at the same time, what you're trying to also do is also look at your third parties, which are, you have seen a lot of supply chain attack of lately, right? So that's where now organizations are also moving ahead on that, trying to fix their, the third party management as well, ensuring that they compliant, because you don't want to falter because of them. So, which is what I'm trying to say. You're now collaborating more, trying to create a mesh structure for your own self, right? And that's where we're heading to. Right?
Absolutely. Now, traditionally, security has been very sort of in firefighting mode. I mean, like threat-centered. Now it's become very defense or, prediction-centered. So why is it critical to evolve from all of that into a more holistic or a risk-based approach?
That's a great question, Anita. In my last point that I said, right, like we evolved, like organizations are now evolving, let's say, from, doing things which were like point in time.
Right.
Now look at this like this, right? Like when we talk about threats, especially now, let's look at cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, you always have the alert fatigue. People are talking about there are too many things which are happening. You are always, you have SOC teams. You're always concentrating in terms of your IOCs that are getting generated, and making sure that there's you don't miss out on anything or any threat that can actually lead to a breach, right? Now, what are we trying to do here? A threat is nothing but which will basically a threat is basically something that you look at you are trying to expose a vulnerability within your infrastructure. But when you put both these two things together, threat into vulnerability is nothing but your risk. Right. So what are we trying to do is we're trying to basically look at risk rather than threat. The whole idea is risk, because at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, the point is you'll probably say, this was my risk, which I didn't look at it, or I overlooked at it.
Right.
Or let's say, what are we trying to protect is from a risk perspective, because the stakeholders understand the risk language.
Right.
They would not understand the threat, or let's say what vulnerability, because that becomes too technical for them.
Right.
So we want to make it more easier. We want to make it more relevant, because in the realm of, let's say, regulators or financial regulators of, things such as that, it will be always risk that will come first, right? Then the threat or something, right? So we're trying to do here is take a back step. I'm not saying you should not have a SOC or a threat or vulnerability. What I'm trying to say is do all of that, but there should always be an overlay of, let's say, a risk-based approach or a risk orchestration center. Like how we have, the security orchestration center, you should always have a risk orchestration center. So that the SOC remains here, the ROC remains here. So SOC and ROC, so this is how the overlay will come in.
Right.
That's how your key stakeholders do understand the importance, right? Because they will understand the risk language. Because the reason why they say, what I'm trying to say that is when you look at, as I said, from a GRC perspective, in the second line of defense, we always talk about a risk appetite. An organization will always talk from a risk perspective and say, okay, this is my appetite. If this goes wrong, if this is my, this is my risk, and if there's something goes wrong, this is the kind of financial implication that I would probably. That's what a stakeholder would understand, right? So when you have SOC and ROC, the ROC will basically try in terms of speaking the risk language, looking at the appetite, and then taking immediate actions on that, right? That's how you'll probably, probably the need for a risk-based approach is making more sense. I'm not saying don't look at SOC, but I'm saying put an overlay on that and probably look at from the language that a stakeholder will understand.
Right. It's all a matter of perspective.
Yes. Makes out.
Now, third-party risk is often an afterthought. Yet it's a massive vulnerability vector. Now, why do you think third-party risk remains a blind spot for so many organizations?
That's a good question. I would probably say, Anita, look, when you look at third-party risk management, the very first thing, I still remember, Lalit is our CEO as well. He talks about third-party risk as more in terms of third-party, instead of risk management as record management. But I'll probably put it in a more simpler words. Probably, what organizations currently are doing, they're looking at third-party receiver management. You have a questionnaire. You just send out a questionnaire to your, let's say, any vendor that you have. How often do you think that they will probably give you an answer which is no?
Right.
They'll always say yes because they want to comply with you so that they get the, get the contract, right? And how often do we have teams really looking into that nitty-gritties of what they have given in terms of data and validating the data?
Right.
Right. I mean, we don't do that. Right. So there's a definite need in terms of, let's say if I'm a vendor, I'm saying, okay, do you have a firewall policy in place? Do you have an EDR in your infrastructure? How often do you guys, review your policies on these or et cetera, et cetera? I really doubt if it's anything happening. Right. But how would you know that? Because every time it's generally the answer is always going to be yes. And you take that as an answer and you basically give them some kind of rating, and that's about it. Now, that's not actually risk management. That's receiver management. Is all you have received that input and a data, and that's about it. So all you need to start now working towards is in terms of, okay, when you're saying that, can you give me an evidence? A. B is, first of all, you probably look at your contract with them, and do you have a right to audit first? If you have a right to audit, which means that you can probably look in terms of whatever answers these guys have given to you, also go back and try and see where they stand. B and C, I would probably say, do you even really tier them in different layers, right? Usually, let's say somebody who gives you a printing cartridge would not be like a critical vendor for you, right? But somebody who's probably looking at your SOC, Right? That's a critical vendor for you, right? So how are you going to really look at both these two parties? You can't see them in the same with the same vision, right? Okay, fine, you're good here, and this guy is also good. It doesn't work like this, right? So you have to have a tiered approach. You have to look in terms of your criticality. Once you have defined that criticality, then you need to really drill them down and probably see where they really stand.
Right.
And because that's where you really see that's the supply chain issue that we are seeing right now.
Right.
Most of the attacks that are coming through is supply chain. Right. So are we really putting those gaps, are we actually looking at those gaps and trying to fill them? That's the most critical answer that we really need to, probably answer right now. Otherwise, it will be very late. Is something that I would probably say. And this has to be an autonomous process rather than, and an automated as well, rather than like an Excel-based approach. Because that's, gone are the days where you really look at Excel, right? You have AI tools, you have LLMs that you should probably work around there and probably see where they really stand. Yeah.
So it's basically a question of breaking it down and trying to understand each segment.
Absolutely. So I would probably say you'll always need to have a bird's eye view, the bird's eye view for the stakeholders, but then you need to have a granular, absolutely. You have to have that approach, and then you have those SMEs working specifically on that, or probably on those projects if you do not have the SMEs internally, and then start building that ecosystem for yourself.
Right. Now, if there's one thing that a security leader should do today to break out of the silo and move towards a risk-centric thinking, what do you think it should be?
Well, to be fairly honest, it will be, Anita, in terms of the approach that one probably needs to look at. So let's say you are a CISO of an organization or a CIO or a CTO, whatever it is, right? And you have, let's say, this kind of a role. I'd probably say that A is... you have to give the true picture of an organization. So initially, I would probably say that when you join that organization, or let's say you're inside the organization, look at a current state assessment of the organization. Give them the true picture.
All right.
The biggest mistake that we do is we do not give the true picture out, right? The reason is because you're always thinking that, hey, if I give the true picture, is it really going to help me, or is it going to be, putting me in jeopardy? But to be fairly honest, you need to give a true picture saying, hey, this is where we are. Right? Our maturity scale could be maybe 1 or maybe ad hoc or whatever it is, right? Because you have many things you might not be doing, right? So let's give a true picture. And then you start building towards it so that, the whole point is when you give them a true picture, this is where you stand in terms of your maturity. This is where you really want to be as an organization. Then you can tell them these are the timelines, these are the milestones, these are the projects that you really need to look at. Only once you've done this, you've set the right expectations for the stakeholders. You have not only that, but you have also ensured which are the teams that you will collaborate with.
Right.
Right, because that's very critical for you, right? And third is the approach in terms of how you look at in terms of taking up agile as a methodology within the organization if it's not. Because that's how you will have outcomes in sprints with, let's say, fortnightly, monthly. You can track your progress, and you can also collaborate with multiple teams. Otherwise, it will never be a case because, otherwise it's always like people still working in silos. This is how we'll try and bring things up together. Once you start building that trust, then you have, your review meetings with your management, maybe on a quarterly basis, and try and show them, okay, these were my milestones for this quarter. Where do I stand? And how we are breaking it down, right? So that's the ideal approach. I'll probably say that you can probably, break this siloed approach and have a more collaborative approach.
Absolutely. Now, where do you see cybersecurity in the next 3 to 5 years? Where are we talking in terms of regulations and what we just spoke about, third-party risk?
Great question, Anita, here, because 3 to 5 years, which is going to be a midterm, environment that we're really looking at. I see, currently we're talking only Gen AI, right? And we're talking about we have been using as individuals just as, let's say, your chat GPTs and stuff such as that, which is more generative AI. And now the time has come where, these models have learned a lot more. And we're talking about agentic AI, right? Which means that they can do most of the task on their own because there's a lot of data which they can already handle because these models have learned. So I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll probably see a lot more happening specifically on the AI and then be the quantum, because these are two areas that, we'll probably see a lot of focus. And I think so these are areas which are new to us. I think so there will be a lot more focus in terms of in terms of governance. What is the right structure for any organization, or let's say any any body as well, to give that a great structure in terms of what should be the right policy, what should be the right processes around that. Would be in terms of, apart from that, one needs to look at then getting more operational and try and see how can we really have more structure in the operations side as well, because currently, to be fairly honest, most organizations, let's say the business teams, or let's say individuals or users, are using AI, which is not correct, because you're giving out data right at the end of the day, which is to your third, could be a third party or whatever, right? So you're giving out data of all the project that you're doing and so on and so forth. So organizations need to start building that, have an internal thing so that you can start building on it rather than, using that, and probably have certain, I would say, measures on that as well.
Right.
So these are areas that we are not really clear, or let's say even shadow AI. That's what I was trying to say. So, so these are areas that we are not really clear as of now. And I think so most of the organizations will put a lot of focus on that to cover that up. And the second would be on the quantum side, because that's, again, an area that's really picking up. I think so that would be a game changer in the next 3 to 5 years for securing them as well. Yeah.
I think the gist of our conversation comes down to the fact that there needs to be increased collaboration and increased awareness as technology progresses and as security takes on new realms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Anita, because the point is, we need to collaborate, because the point and create awareness.
Right.
Because the end user, the way we have been working, look, I'll be very honest, there'll be a drastic shift in the way we work.
Right.
Right. And there would be, in my personal opinion, again, I'm being very honest, in my personal opinion, we probably see a lot of change in terms of the workforce that we're currently having, right? Let's say developers right now, I mean, no hard feeling, but let's say if AI can do most of developers' job, then we probably see a lot of change in the workforce as well. So hence, I would probably say workforce change will come through. Users need to understand what they need to deliver. And I would probably say that we'll probably see a lot more disintegration in terms of larger organizations, and probably looking at, disintegrating many processes to smaller outside, smaller third parties or organizations, right? Because that's where they want to, excel fast. And this is going to be, in my personal opinion, this is what we'll probably see in the next 3 to 5 years, where you'll probably have more disintegrated workforce. People will start building their own things and then try and merge with a larger organization. That's how it will be. Yeah.
Right. I think the conversation around security and risk management is something that could go on, and it'll take on more dimensions as technology develops, I think. So that was a very insightful conversation.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Anita. My pleasure. And thank you so much for hosting me here. And thank you so much for Q&A as well, for hosting me here as well. And thank you. And I look forward to being in touch, and probably many more such kind of conversations. And thank you.
Thank you.